Gesture.
All right, you can see that, right, Dawn?
Yep.
Awesome. Well, I think that
it's not on presentation mode though. It's on slide mode. Not
Really?
that matters.
That's weird because it's on presentation mode on mine. Hold on.
You might have shared the wrong one.
Share window. Okay, did it switch over now?
No, it's still on slide mode.
Ah,
I mean, we can see it, but yeah.
that is weird because it's now.
Yeah.
It generally shows up on two screens, and maybe try picking the other one.
No, I know. I did that. So.
Oh, okay.
Huh.
And did you hit play and you hit presentation so it's showing full screen?
Girl, this
You've done
is
this a million
my
times.
first
I know.
What happens when you hit
do better than I
slideshow?
do.
I did hit slideshow, and that
Nothing worse than 20 questions when you're trying.
I know. I like it. I do these all day long. Let's see. Now it's not even pulling it up on my windows. All right, forget it. We'll do it the way that I don't really like to. Now it's not sharing at all. I'll be right back.
If you ever need to, you can always send it to me on my email and I'll pull it up.
All right, I'm going to log out and then log back in, see if that will work better.
Okay, we'll be here. So we have a little bit, we'll cover this later, but we have a little bit of extra time for bee chat today, you guys, which is really nice because I know we're mid-season and people's bees are building up, and I'm sure a lot of people have a lot of questions and things to chat about. So we've only got a 30-minute presentation today, so we're going to extend our bee chat time. So we'll get lots of time to chat and ask questions because it feels like we never actually have enough time to connect and do that. So, and let's see. While we're waiting for Tracy, I'll plug this later, but the picnic is coming up. So if you can make it to the picnic, it's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be on July 20th, and we'll have a picnic and a board meeting, and it's kind of a potluck. It's in the Arboretum. It's really just such a beautiful location for a picnic. Oh, and Kathy's back. Or Tracy's back. So I'll plug that a little bit later, but just a little heads up teaser that the annual picnic is coming up. Well, I might just jump in and work through the club business until Tracy's ready, and then we'll just kind of, that way we don't have to double up on things. So is Kathleen here? Nope. First thing I want to say is I want to talk about the apiary. It's doing really, really well. I wanted to show some gratitude for Kathleen, who has just done such amazing work in the apiary. So we're there 2 or 3 times a month. I come and teach. Jeff has done a couple really good classes. He's coming back to do some more. Kit has come and taught a class. So you've got a lot of really good experienced beekeepers in the club that show up in the apiary. And there's really nothing that replaces hands-on experience in the apiary, seeing how people do it, getting to ask your questions live. It's just a great opportunity. So the schedule is on the calendar, but we've got in July, we've got 3 of them coming up. I'm going to do July 6th and July 20th, and then Jeff is going to do July 13th. So come on out and help. Everybody just always has such a good time. The beekeepers are the nicest people. And when you get to hang out in an apiary full of really nice people working the bees, there's just kind of nothing better in the world on a summer day. It's just fantastic. So come on out and try it. You always learn. You always walk away learning a lot. So right now we have 9 hives in the apiary. So we overwintered 3 and we bought 3. And then we've had some splits and some swarms. And so we've got, 9, maybe 10. Actually, I think it's 10 now. 10 hives in the apiary, which is kind of technically too many hives. We don't want that many hives in the apiary. So when you're a good beekeeper, what happens is you wind up with more and more bees. And so if you only want a few colonies, one of your challenges is how to let that growth happen, but still keep your own to the number that you want. And if you want more, then that's great. You can always get more. But what we're going to do to help take a little pressure off of the apiary is at the picnic this year, we are going to be selling off some of the hives. Now, these are really healthy hives that have been in the apiary all year, and we've been tending them. Some of them are mediums and some of them are deeps. And we're going to go ahead and auction. I think we're going to try and auction off 3 of them to get down to just like 6. And then we might wind up doing a little bit of combines in the fall to get it down even a little bit further towards winter. But these are not just nukes. This isn't a 5-frame nukes. We're going to sell a full 10 frames of deeps or 16 frames of mediums. So this is enough to get a really strong hive going. And because it is getting a little bit late in the year to be selling nukes. And so if you're still looking for bees or something happened to your bees during this dearth, then come to the picnic and we're just going to kind of auction it off. We'll have just a fairly low minimum price, just kind of enough to pay us back for our frames and the wax that's on them. And then anything after that is acceptable. So it's probably going to be a bargain, and they will definitely be good bees. And I see, is Tracy? Oops, she popped out again. Okay, so we'll keep going. So we have club events coming up. Kit, do you want to talk about the upcoming in August, the Chomp Festival? But you'll have to come close to the microphone, because I think we're still having trouble hearing you.
She has to be closer and the microphone was muted. So between those 2 things, I'm sure you heard nothing.
Nothing, no.
Nothing.
You're good right there. Just
Yeah, it just sounds better here than here. That's impossible. The Chomp Festival is at Miramore Park, and it's a great event put on by King County with lots of different vendors and music, and it's a family festival that's I can't remember. Nancy, do you remember what the acronym stands for? No. Miramore Park. Yeah. Children have awesome. Anyway,
which end of the forum is it?
I know but it's very well signed when you get there. That Chomp is, this is going on there, maybe their 3rd or 4th year. And we've been there for every year, and it's very well organized, and they have a wonderful, if you come to help volunteer, they have a wonderful tent that we're welcome to wander through and grab a bagel or tangerine. And anyway, it's a great happening. So I'll be putting out requests for support. We'll need a shift in the morning and a shift in the afternoon to make it light for everybody. And then you have time to see the fair. So it's a 1-day event. And so, yeah, stand by for more scoop on that.
And do you need more volunteers for it? Or are you all full of volunteers?
Yeah, that's what I said. I'll be
sorry, I'm texting
Tracy,
so I missed it. Sorry. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, good. And if you can go to the events, they're a lot of fun. You get to go to the festival and talk to people about bees, and it's just really a fun day. So Tracy, if you're ready, I'll let you hop in whenever you're ready. And if not, then I'll just I'll keep moving through. And there you are.
Well, I'm ready. Let's see if my computer wants to share its screen this time.
Mm-hmm.
All right, now can you see in presentation mode?
No, but it's probably okay in slide mode.
Oh, okay, then I will get out of this and go back to slide mode too, because now it's all messed up.
I can see your cursor moving. So I think where you are is fine.
Okay, well, I guess we're in slide mode today. Sorry, guys. One last try. Now?
No, sorry.
No,
Sorry.
all right, forget it. All right, so moving right along. So, we'll just make it bigger. Not that big. Too big. All right, space management. So now that the blackberries are finally putting out a little bit of nectar, it's time to make sure that you've got enough room. And so just a quick review, you need to make sure that you stay ahead of both the nectar storage space and the brood nest space. So many times new beekeepers, me included when I was a new beekeeper, I kept adding boxes to the top thinking I was fine. But what happens is once they get that layer of honey, the queen won't pass that honey barrier to go above that to lay additional eggs. So if the part down below gets crammed up and over full with nectar and honey, then they will start swarming as well. And so this time of year, it's a really good idea, especially when the blackberries are blooming, to at least tip your boxes forward once a week to see, are they starting swarm cells or not? And as you can see on the left-hand side there, there's no swarm cells started there in between the two boxes. On the right-hand side, there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 plus 7 plus the broken one up here. So that colony already has capped queen cells, and they are going to swarm if they haven't already. So you would definitely want to think about getting that queen out of there and putting her at least into a nuke temporarily and reduce down to 2 of those queen cells and go ahead and let them raise those queens. Or you can do some splits, which is beyond tonight's presentation, but that's a good opportunity to make some splits out of that box. All right, and last time I promised to have some pictures of the queen excluder that I think if you are dead set on using a queen excluder, this is the one to use. It's the metal one with the long openings that are parallel with the tops of the frames. The bees have a lot easier time getting through there, and they don't have to go then through the brood nest area if you have upper openings. So notice this really tall stack here. Some of the bees are using the bottom, but there's a whole lot of bees using that entrance that I have right above the queen excluder. And then there's other additional bees using the entrance that I have above the second box. Those are called emery shims, and they're just a shim with an opening in there so that the bees can go in and out without having to force their way through the brood chamber and the queen excluder to put in the nectar. And if you think about it, the advantage for you and for them is they can make more trips during the day. So therefore they can put up more honey while the blackberries are blooming. So your brood area considerations, you do want to continually have space for that queen to lay eggs. And if that means taking either a frame of honey out or a frame of brood, capped brood, then that's what you definitely need to do in order to continually give her space to lay. Right now is also an awesome time to get a lot of wax drawn out. So they'll draw a frame of wax in here, lickety split. I usually put the new frames in the position 3 or 7. So this green one is a drone comb. And if you're using drone combs to moderate the amount of varroa that you have in the summer, that number 3 position is a great spot for that too. So you can pull out frames of honey from they're usually on the outside that are capped. You can store that in your freezer. And then you can slide that new frame in position 3 and just move those other 2 out. And then up in the honey stored space, this helps stop them from swarming as well. Slows down that swarming urge because they don't like to leave a untidy or neatly packed house. So you can see in this frame, I've got 5 regular frames, and I've got the brand new frames on the in betweens so that they'll draw out additional frames. This is a great way to get more wax drawn, especially if you're short, and then also slow down that swarming urge because they want to have all this wax drawn and full of honey before they take off. And then moving right along to monitoring for mites. Now's the time when the queen, since we just passed the summer solstice, the queens will start slowing down their egg production, and the varroa unfortunately keep forging on. And so right now is a critical time to keep your mite counts down. And I've put the easy check on here. This is a great device. If you don't have one, I highly recommend getting one. Their website is on the page here, and they have a nice video for using it for an alcohol wash. And if you're super against alcohol washes, even though they're the most reliable means of measuring your mite counts, they also now have information and a video on how to use the same device to do a sugar shake as well, a powdered sugar shake. If you don't want to do either of those, a sticky board count is better than nothing. It's not very accurate, but it'll at least give you a good idea of whether you should get on board and do something about treating. And so you would do a 24-hour sticky board count. And if you have more than 8 frames of bees and see more than 40 mites, then you definitely want to treat. If you have 7 or less frames of bees, treat. If there's 20 or more mites, like I said, those are one of these spitball kind of things. But certainly if you have a bee in your colony and you can see mites like in this one, usually the mites hang out on the underside of the bees, but this one bee has deformed wing virus. She's a goner. And I would make the argument that if you see a deformed wing virus in your colony and you don't immediately start treating that day or the next day, that colony is going to crash pretty quickly. And even if you do start treating, they're so far gone at this point, they still might crash anyway. So you want to make sure not to ever see deformed wing virus in your colony. And the way to do that is these monthly varroa checks, and then making sure that you treat if you're above 2% infestation. Some people even treat now at 1%. And if your next question is, okay, great, what do I use? There's 3 things that people use during the summertime. Formic Pro and HopGuard are both currently labeled for use during the honey flow. And so those should be your go-tos. If you're not as concerned about what the FDA has approved, the Viroxan strips are approved in Europe, and some beekeepers make them and use them in their beehives here. Vaporization is not very effective at all right now because there's lots of capped brood, and oxalic acid does not work. It does not penetrate the wax cappings. So it's not very effective when you have capped brood. It works great when you have a brood break and no capped brood, like when you've captured a swarm or after your hive has swarmed, if you've made a split and there's that natural brood break, then oxalic acid's a great way to go. And then finally, your homework assignment, since reading the comb seems to be super intensely important this year, especially more so than any other year that I've kept bees. Most of us got caught off guard with the depth and the length of the dearth that we had this spring in between the maples and the blackberries blooming. And those of us that were fortunate enough to listen to our colleagues and friends and really understood what we were looking at in our colonies were able to catch up to the feeding cycle. I immediately put syrup and pollen patties on about a month ago during a time when I normally never feed, but the bees were all literally starving. So that is coming up again in August. We usually have a dearth of both pollen and nectar in August as well. So in between now and then is a great time to watch Randy Oliver's presentation called Reading the Combs. There are several presentations on YouTube, and I think we probably still have his talk when he talked with our club on our YouTube page. Watch it again if you've seen it once. I've seen it 3 or 4 times now, and I learn something every time I watch it. So that's your homework assignment for July. And with that, I will stop sharing and see what questions people have.
Maybe less a question and more of a comment. About a month ago, I was noticing, sort of in the depths of January weather, that RBs up at Camino were kicking out drones and removing pupae. I did end up giving them a bunch of syrup, and they seem fine now. Just wondering, have any of you noticed something like that?
Yeah, so that's a great question / comment. That will definitely happen when the bees decide that they're in a crisis or when they don't need the drones. They're more interested in survival, and the drones will actually use up a lot of resources. And so when they're short on resources, the drones are the first to go. So they'll kick out mature drones, they'll start pulling the drones, and they'll cannibalize the drone brood in order to get protein. So the larva and the young bees need protein. And that's where the pollen patties come in. And Randy Oliver's presentation is awesome, where he explains the needs and then how to, watch the pollen interface and the honey interface and that's where the art of beekeeping comes in, is trying to stay ahead of that so that they can continually build until this time of year without any dips, right? But they will cannibalize brood if they need to.
Yeah, once the weather cleared, they were just mainlining the pollen. Like 80% of them were coming in with
pollen too. But the problem was, I believe, that they didn't have enough hours in the day in between the rain squalls to forage. So even though they were bringing pollen in like mad all day long, they didn't have enough hours to get out there and bring enough. So they were still short.
Yeah.
The other thing I noticed is that when the natural forage shut down in the environment, even when you're feeding your bees, the queens, it felt to me like the queens were responding to the lack of real pollen and real nectar coming in, probably particularly the nectar. And a lot of them just shut down. They either greatly reduced their laying or they completely stopped laying. And so what happens if it was a newer hive this year, I saw this with a lot of people. If it was a newer hive and that queen shuts down, then the bees start recognizing the lack of pheromone that comes from the open brood. Because part of the pheromone in the colony is the open brood telling them that everything is okay and is on track. And when that stopped, then a lot of the queens, we had a lot of queen losses this year, I think directly related to the dearth. So I guess the takeaway is don't feel bad. If you're having a struggle, if you're having a challenge this year, you're not a bad beekeeper. This has just been a really unusual year. And if this is your first year, I apologize. You started in a rough year.
Yeah, it's been a rough year. And I literally fed 100 pounds of sugar 1 week. And then a week and a half later, I did it all over again. They were bone dry.
My. Whew. How many hives do you have?
40.
Okay.
So I put a question in the chat, but
Yeah.
I'm just really eager to hear. So I have 2 hives here in Seattle. They both emerged from winter. They're very different. One emerged from winter crazy strong, crazy active, and by early June there were 2 supers full of honey practically. Then the other hive was slower to get into the winter. They were doing fine. There was plenty of brood, and they were, doing okay. Although they seemed to ignore the sugar water longer than I expected them to. I'm not sure what their attitude about sugar water is coming from, but they were a little bit
I have
less
some
sort of.
Either.
Yeah, they just didn't seem to want it. I don't know why, but
Yeah.
but they're okay. The queen is. I always find the queen there. She's nice and fat. She's nice and busy. There's plenty of brood. The other one, they both ended up with mites. Unfortunately, I treated them with formic acid, and the one that I'm worried about, we went queenless around the time that we did the formic acid treatment. I'm not sure if there was a swarm that I didn't notice or whatever, but now that hive has been queenless for several weeks, and they have multiple active laying workers, and so the even above the queen excluder now, there's like a larva up there and on that, like an empty couple of frames that were there. And I'm just not sure that I can even save them at this point because the laying workers are so active, and the whole hive is full of brood, but it's all drone brood.
Yeah. So that's unfortunate that they accidentally went queenless too long. And there's a lot of chatter online where you can try to save a drone laying colony, but it takes a lot of resources and a lot of time, and it's dubiously effective. And you can't buy a new queen and put her in there because they think they have a queen.
Right, kill it. Yeah, I think I've had 2 queens emerge from queen cells, and there's no queen in the hive. And I even just this last check, I found like 4 charged queen cups. It's like, what are they doing?
Well,
there can't be any females in the hive. So what are they trying to accomplish?
Well, I mean, they're all females, but the problem is none of them have fertilized.
Yeah, babies. There can't be any female babies to put into the charged queen cups. So I don't know what they're trying to accomplish.
Right. So in my humble opinion, the best thing to do and the fastest way to get back to 2 colonies is to go ahead and take that colony, take the hive all the way apart and take it as far away on your own property as you can get and shake all the bees out. And then they'll fly back to the original location, which is probably right next to your other hive, and they'll beg admittance into that colony. And then
my 2 hives are not near each other. They're not too far, but I don't think they're in 2 different backyards of friends of mine.
Oh.
So so they probably wouldn't do that. They probably wouldn't fly to the other hive.
So what I usually do when I get laying workers is I just do a newspaper combine. I might do 2 sheets of newspaper. But the safest way to combine them back together is like get a double screen board and put that between there, because what happens is the queen pheromones filter up into the laying workers, and in a week or 2, any workers that were laying can revert, although by that time they've probably aged out and are dead. But they can again go through the suppression of their reproduction with the queen pheromone. So I usually do a double layer of newspaper and combine them. And then once they're all combined, you do still have to take that hive apart, and you wind up throwing away all of that foundation, all the wax.
Yeah, because it's all drone-sized cells now at this point.
Yeah, so it's the minute you suspect laying workers, just either combine them or shake them out like Tracy said, because the longer you wait, the more comb they wreck.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Yeah, Kathy's got
That's
her
what I
hand up.
figured you would all say.
Something to add. You're on mute, Kathy. There you go.
Yeah, just got it. Okay, I put an answer to you, William, in the chat, and I would like to just tell you my way of doing it and let you know that I've had real success doing it this way. But the one thing that I don't know is how many frames of bees are in that hive.
At this point, there's easily 2 full brood boxes worth of actual bees in there.
Okay.
Now, increasingly, there's drones more than anything
Okay,
else, unfortunately.
here's what you need to do. Take those boxes as far away as you can. Put another box in the original place. In that box, put a frame of cap brood and a frame of open brood. Then go to where you have the 2 boxes far away and shake out all the bees. The foragers will easily fly back. Any females that have not become laying workers can fly back. The ones who developed ovaries become too fat to fly, and they will be out there in your grass somewhere. And by having the brood and the cap brood, you have sources for them to make a new queen. And by having the cap brood, you will have bees, young bees, hatching out between 5 and 15 days old that make royal jelly to feed that queen. And if you do that, just like I've said, you probably will have a success. I've had it fail a couple of times, but I've done it probably 100 times in 23 years. So if you want to do that, I'd say give it a shot. At least you learn something if it doesn't work out, and you can combine the bees that are left.
All right, thank you, Kathy. I think that makes sense. I'll try to give it a shot. Thanks.
Kit said there's some questions in the room, so we'll go to the folks in the Grand Visitor Center next.
And actually, let me ask really quick. So we're just kind of segueing straight into the chat period, which will go until about 8 o'clock. We've got until a little bit before 8. Kit, do you want to run the room separately, or do we want to do a combined one where we stop talking on Zoom for a few minutes and bring in some questions from the room?
Can we get these 2 questions answered and then maybe separate?
Okay.
Go ahead.
Great. Thank you. This is Michael here at the Arboretum. Tracy, you mentioned for overcrowding and seeing the queen cells that you would remove the queen to a nuke box and then euthanize all the queen cells except 2. Is that not leading up to a split, or can you explain where you go after doing that?
So that is exactly a split. And so in that picture, those queen cells were already capped. So the bees have decided we're out of here. So it's a matter of catching the queen and getting her out of there before they split. So that's why I like to pull out just 3 frames. So a frame of capped brood, a frame of food with honey and pollen, and then a frame of open brood to support that queen, along with some empty drawn combs so she can continue to lay. And then you've got her in reserve here, and then you've got your 2 queen cells that you're going to let reproduce. And then you can decide from there, do I want to raise this queen? Or and maybe you do, right? Because maybe it's last year's queen. You're like, oh, this is a great chance to have a new queen without having to buy one. So then you've got the old queen and a nuke, and she's producing eggs and stuff. And then once the new queen gets going, then you can, if you want to recombine them, you kill the old queen, do a newspaper combine, and put those bees on the top. And then the young queen's pheromones will go up inside, and then you'll be back down to the same 1 colony.
Thank you.
Sure.
My name is Bruce, and a couple things. One of the things is
could you speak up? Could you move closer to the owl? I'm sorry. There we go.
Can you hear me now?
Better. Yeah, thanks, Bruce.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm an old beekeeper, but I'm new to the thing of raising bees. And one of the things I did is I went out and have a very flat plate that I thought was the right mixture of syrup. That was a 2.5 quarts with 5 scoops of to make syrup out of sugar. They didn't touch it. Now, I couldn't figure out whether they were running off and the nectar's running and so they wouldn't touch it, or whether I mismade it. The ants loved it, wiped them out. So, but what I'm curious is I've seen where it says you can make this sugar syrup and then load it in. I have the little black ones for putting in the, but if the nectar's flowing, is it really necessary to feed them? You're saying we're having difficulty somewhat here we're in Seattle. So, it's because of the temperature. I see that they don't move much on the cold. So the question is, do we try to feed them and then they'll go to it if they need it?
So I guess my question back to you is, you said you used 5 scoops of sugar. So 1-to-1 water and sugar syrup is like 1 equal scoop of water to 1 equal scoop of sugar. So if you're using a quart of sugar, you use a quart of water. Is pretty close to 1-to-1.
Okay, so if I gave them too much, they won't touch it, or they'll get drunk.
What
Well,
you gave
no.
them was
So if you
too much water and not enough sugar.
Oh.
So if you did 2.5 quarts, you're going to need about 5 pounds of sugar in.
Yeah, I put in 5 pounds.
Oh, okay.
But I didn't, and I weighed it. I actually had a scale. So what I'm trying to understand now is it's a new hive. I got one. I put another one on top, so I've got 2. And it's the guy who had all these before donated all this to me, and I have like 10 full hives. And I'm going through them, and the bees have gone and come over and cleaned it. So I put the ones they were flying out of the hive and cleaning it, which I was amazed at. And then so I loaded that one in, and now I'm waiting to see how they're going to react to that. So my question is we're in the middle of a flow. Should I go up 1 more level? I see that you got them stacked, these 10 inches stacked 5 high.
Yeah, it just depends. So,
Don't give me the depends.
Well, hold on. So your original question was, should I continue to feed during the flow? And
yes,
if you need to draw wax, I land on the side of keep feeding, because if they don't need it, they won't take it. But it takes a lot of energy to make wax. So when I want them to make lots, I continue feeding. And so
these combs, these combs that I put in there, the wax is all built from the previous owner. So the wax is there. They just cleaned them out and they built a little bit and moved on. So
okay. So then here's your assignment. Go watch Randy Oliver's Reading the Combs. Look inside your beehive and make your decision from there. If they've got lots of resources, you don't need to feed them. But if they're short on resources, either syrup and or pollen, then follow Randy's advice in the presentation and decide to either feed syrup, pollen, or both, or neither.
Well, how about that bee food patty you talked about? I haven't seen those yet.
The pollen patties?
Oh yeah, that's what you're talking about, pollen patty?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Oh,
and a follow-up. Oh, go ahead and finish your thought.
I'm going to try to be innovative. I'm a solar powered kind of guy, and we're building a solar power heater, and we need to design to temperature, and they've got some electronic ones already built, which I didn't know. And we're going to have them so that in the diesel winter over, anyway.
Go ahead,
Don. Yeah, you want to keep them below 50 degrees, below 50. You want to keep them below 50 in the winter, or they're going to have trouble.
Don't want them warm.
Yeah, don't heat them too much. But a follow up on the sugar syrup, and especially if you are if you have new hives and you're feeding all summer long, because that's kind of what we have to do when we have brand new hives. It's when they say first year hive, that means the hive itself doesn't have any wax in it. If you start out with a hive that has a lot of wax in it, you may not need to feed as much, because like Tracy said, it takes a lot of energy to draw wax, and they might be able to use that energy to go out and forage and bring in food. So they might, if you have drawn comb, 20 frames of drawn comb in a hive, you're probably okay not feeding all year. But if you are feeding all year, what helps is to make sure that you use either Honeybee Healthy or Pro Health, one of those additives, and a little bit of vinegar. And what that does is it preserves the sugar water, so it's not going to mold or ferment on you. Because if it ferments, it gives the bees dysentery. And I can, in the cooler months of early spring, I can mix up a 5-gallon bucket of sugar syrup with those additives, and it will stay good for a month or more. And otherwise, you wind up dumping out and throwing away a lot of sugar that's fermented or molding. And so, and it's really good for your bees. It helps them if you're having trouble getting them to eat the syrup. The Honeybee Healthy, Hive Alive, Pro Health, those are all really good additives that encourage eating the sugar.
Yeah, I don't use that in August and September because I find that they rob more. I just minimize the amount. I use Pro Health, but I just minimize the amount of syrup that I put in so it doesn't ferment, because I've had a lot of problems with robbing in August and September when I do that.
Did you say, excuse me, did you say, the first lady there, did you say you use a teaspoon of vinegar? Is that what I heard you say?
So I use about half as much of the Pro Health or the Honeybee Healthy that the bottle calls for, because I think what they say is too much. It just kind of has to smell good. Yeah, it just kind of has to smell good. So I add however much of the Honeybee Healthy that I add an equal amount of vinegar.
Okay, you broke off, so I just wanted to be sure that I heard the vinegar. An equal amount of whatever the Honeybee Health is, to make it. I can follow directions. Okay.
Yep. I keep my vinegar in a gin bottle, so I just give them a shot of vinegar and then sugar.
Yeah, and I do 1 tablespoon of Pro Health per gallon and 1 tablespoon-ish of vinegar.
Okay, thank you.
So Kit, do you want to take the room and we'll hang out here in Zoom, and then we should come back maybe say, let's say 10 to 8. So we got about a half hour. Okay. Now we don't have to yell quite so loud. We won't have to project all the way into the room. So how are you guys' bees doing? What else is going on?
So far, my blackberry flow is nothing but a trickle. They're gaining weight because they've brooded up significantly, but almost nothing in the stored.
Yeah, same.
They're eating everything that they bring in. Yeah.
I'm really go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say I'm really concerned that we're going to have really high winter losses this year. So you really want to feed more than you even normally would. Feed, support. I don't know if you do whatever you can do to help support your hives between now and fall. The queens were put under a tremendous amount of stress when all of that natural forage shut down, and that's going to make it harder for them to get through the winter. And it also aged them a whole nother year because they had to brood up not just in spring but in fall. So we get 1 year less out of our queens, I think. It seems likely.
And I'm really worried about the blackberry flow this year because my bees are barely working the blackberries, which tells me there's not much food in there. Usually there's, bees everywhere, all over them. They're competing for the flowers practically, and they're working them, but barely.
I don't even see the bees on the blackberries this year.
Yeah.
I've been barely seeing them. I guess just in general, like a week and a half ago, I was saying with my friends that you got to be careful where you open your mouth because a bumblebee might fly in it. But nowadays, not so much.
Yeah,
I went a lot of the little solitary ones.
Zero bumbles, zero
One
flies.
thing that you have to remember is we're all subject to the weather, and so are the blackberries. If it rains, it washes the nectar out of the nectaries. It washes the pollen out of the flower, and it takes a while for that to get back going again. So, hopefully in the next week or so, we should see it be up to snuff because the weather's good. But then I just looked at the weather report and we're gonna have more rain. So good luck, everybody.
Well, and we passed winter solstice last week, a few days ago. past, I'm sorry, summer solstice. We passed summer solstice. So the bees are now planning for winter. They're starting to brood down. They are now beginning to look at winter, and we need to look that way and help them plan to get to winter also. And so with this reduced forage, going into winter, you need to have 10 frames of some kind of honey on that hive, either real nectar honey or sugar honey, but you need 10 full frames to get them through the winter. So if you're getting towards the end of July and you're not seeing a ton of honey in there, then around the 1st of August is when I start feeding 2 to 1. And I start that early because if we get one of those Septembers where it suddenly cools down as soon as we hit September, then the bees have a hard time curing that wet sugar into honey. And if they go into winter with wet honey, if they're feeding into September and that honey is uncapped and really, really wet, then it puts a lot of humidity in the colony. And in the middle of winter, it can begin to ferment from the heat of the colony, and that gives them a little bit of winter dysentery. So watch your hives for food level, and whatever your benchmark is for me, it's in early August. I begin feeding 2 to 1.
Yeah, I'm probably just gonna start 1 to 1 next week after I do another inspection, because this week's inspection it was not satisfying, and I'm going, okay, might as well start feeding them now just to get it ready.
I have found that my bees are bringing in a lot of pollen right now. And a lot of times in my hives, I've got 2 colonies that are doing it really strongly. The bottom box just gets filled with pollen. So keep an eye out that and look at that. And, you know, I'll lift a frame or 2 up to each box so that there's some close by where the brood is. So it makes it easy for the nurse bees to get the pollen and feed the bees.
What else? Any thoughts, ideas, any advice? Jeff, do you have any advice? You've got a lot of experience. Or anybody else have questions?
I've got a question.
Mm-hmm.
I started 2 new hives in mid-April, and one of them did not make it through the dearth. Had a whole bunch of dead bees all piling out onto the ground in front of the hive. Think that they may have gotten a paralysis virus. The hive next to it suffered a little bit, but seems to have bounced back. And I currently have 1 hive that was getting honey bound, and I put the leftovers of the dead hive into a 3rd deep on top, and they seem to be making use of that and now laying brood into that one, which is great. Question, I guess, then is, so is it too late as a first-year beekeeper to try to start up a 2nd hive and go for that again, or should I just focus on having 1 really strong one that has extra drawn frames to push through winter?
I just made a split on Sunday. And you can make your split with like Tracy says, the 3 or 4 frames that you need that have pollen, honey, cap brood, and open brood. But if your other hive is really, really booming, then give it some more so that you're equalizing or getting close to equalizing. So you have not one huge one going into winter. By the way, lots of times the bigger hives are the ones that don't make it. So I really recommend that if you're going to try it, you equalize it and build them up. You can always combine when it gets a little bit later towards the fall if you don't think it's large enough.
You know, one thing you might want to consider since you are a first-year beekeeper is to go ahead and make that split and buy a queen for it. And put the queen, obviously you want to have the queen for sure in 1 box, and you know, put the new queen in the other so that it'll start building up right away. Just a word of caution this year, if you're looking for a queen, to make sure you buy locally. and be careful who you buy it from, because on Facebook right now we're overrun with scammers trying to sell queens and take advantage of people, and they don't actually sell you a queen, they just ghost you and then block you after they take your money. So there are several local places to purchase queens from people in the club, and they're excellent queens, so I'd recommend you go that route.
And one other consideration, and this is what I did when I was in my first and second year, is I kind of got ahead of my skis on my splits. And when I say that, I got ahead of my wax. So you have to have those 20 frames of drawn wax in order to have them have room for brood and room for food when you go into winter. So if you've got enough to support 40 frames of wax for those 2 colonies, then it's fine to split, but this is an especially tough year for them to even draw wax. And once we get past blackberry flow, the wax production drops a lot. Now there is a workaround for that. You can go up to Stanwood Bee Company, and they sell frames of drawn wax for $10 a frame. It is used and it is coming from another apiary, so there are risks there. But if you come up short and you're not able to get enough so your bees can store enough food for winter, then that is one way to get it done.
I have a limited amount of deep frames. I'm downsizing. I run all mediums. So if anybody's in a bind, text me 206-465-1464. And I'll see if I can help you out.
And Wendy asks in the chat, she says that my 2 hives are brand new. How many frames of bees and food to prepare before winter? I'm in West Seattle. Don, you want to take that?
I'm sorry, I was off somewhere else. How many
Okay,
frames
never
of
mind.
food? What did you check out for a second?
How many frames of busted? How many frames of bees and brood do you recommend people take into the winter?
Oh gosh, that varies so much. If you've got Italians, they're going to want a lot of brood and a lot of food to feed that brood, because the Italians tend to combat winter by making more babies. That's kind of what they do. They keep their hives large all winter. If you've got Carniolans, then they're going to shrink that nest down sometimes to sometimes by the time you get to October, there's no brood in there. But what you've got is all winter bees. So it really varies by race of bee.
I overwinter 7 frame colonies in what's called Palmer nukes every winter. I'd say that that's the bare minimum, 7 frames of bees and brood and resources. So for a regular hive body, it's not a problem to overwinter in a deep if you plan to feed on top, right? So even better would be 1 deep with bees and brood and some honey, and then 1 medium full of honey on top.
Last year, my dark bees, which are mountain bees, I guess, I overwintered some of them in queen castles. And I didn't actually need to feed because they kept nice honey arches all winter. So I don't know, they didn't use honey. So it really depends on the race of your bee. I've had years where I've had Italian influence where I'm looking at them in the middle of December and like, there's brood everywhere. I mean, what are you doing? It's so it can vary a lot.
I had a 5 frame nuke overwinter last winter by accident. I thought I took them out of there, and then I didn't. And then I took them and rediscovered them in the spring, but that's pretty unusual. I went to the Palmer nukes because I didn't have a lot of success overwintering 5 frames of bees. So especially if you're new, I'd suggest that probably, a 10 frame deep is the minimum.
I take a lot of top bar nukes through winter. They're about 8 top bar frames, which is usually fine because top bars make better use of those honey arches.
Agreed.
So then you get the brood nest down the very bottom and the little nook, and then they kind of move up through that. I find those ones are actually more successful than the big top bars because the colonies are a little smaller going into winter, and they can only go up, right? And they can reach all that food, where the big top bars burn a big hole, and then it's like, here's your food out here, and they can't reach it anymore when they get stuck in the cold.
Yeah, those linear horizontal setups really need insulation in sort of a varied climate like this. I've got a long lang setup for my hive. Currently they're going nuts.
You follow,
I see
Tom
Max has their
Seeley.
hand up.
Sorry, if you follow Tom Seeley, he talks about how our hives, our lang hives, are just not well insulated at all. Don't even compare to natural hives in a tree with a nice propolis envelope around them, keeping them healthy. And his recommendation is to stuff bees down and don't have a lot of space for them, because you're going to be losing them over the winter, and that brood nest is going to get smaller and smaller, and they don't need to heat unnecessary space.
So this is a question maybe for Jeff. So I run top bar hives, and I've got 2 right now that are about 10 bars each. I'm gonna go check them again tomorrow, so I'm not entirely sure on that number. And my question is, should I stuff the ends with insulation and have them each in their own long hive, or should I put a divider board in the middle and have them together in one hive, maybe for a little extra warmth?
How good is your divider board?
It's pretty decent.
Can the queens get through it?
I don't think so.
If they can't get through it, then yeah, sharing the warmth is always a plus, right? But yeah, otherwise you can fill those, put your false walls and your followers, and you can fill that cavity space with whatever insulative material you want, like crumpled newspaper or whatever. But most of the time they're only heating their cluster area. So, having a warm wall, even a really cold spell, can help. But otherwise, and we get 2 of those or 3 of those a year where it would make a difference. The rest of the time, it's really, is it causing more moisture to build up in the top bar? I find that the bigger problem I have is, are they getting enough ventilation in there to get that air out? Because top bars, that water doesn't really get cold and drip down on them, but the whole thing can get damp really quickly if there's not enough ventilation. It's like all the vinyl siding they put on houses, which caused everything to rot. And now they're going back to the old method with creating some of those air gaps they used to have. So. The other thing I have with water is, because you have your top bars, which are solid, I usually actually create a little bit of airflow above the top bar itself, so that wood can vent itself, and that usually fixes most of those problems. Not creating gaps in the wood, just the wood itself can breathe to the outside, and that usually helps, as long as it stays dry.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
And something that helps with the barrier between the colonies is when I'm building one of those, I put weather stripping around the edge of it, any edges where there might be a little bit of a gap, and that not the exposed styrofoam foam rubber kind, but the kind that's fully plastic coated, and that it compresses down, but it really makes a great barrier.
I haven't tried that. I do have foam insulation on top, and they chew that up during summer. It's outside the hive even. I'm like, what are you doing up there and destroying all that?
Yeah.
My bees are.
They're getting microplastics all over the neighborhood.
Yeah, my bees are very destructive. They chew on the wood. I'm like, that was sealed, and now there's a little gap there, and there's a hole, and they're using it as an entrance. So.
Well, you can hear them chewing on it too, and they're going after that styrofoam.
Yeah, mine chew on the wood though too. Like they'll peel back little splinters, and over time they'll make a new entrance somewhere where. Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah, I'm
You
always
just
like,
make
if you
a
look at
box
my
for
hives,
them
I've got
and they'll-
shims I cram in there, and I put nails and wood glue and then try to seal them back up again. It's ridiculous how much they chew on the wood. It's probably part of their secret to keeping. I do put some treatments in, but I'm very light on their treatment, so they're doing a pretty good job of managing the mites themselves.
Yeah, I have to say, if there's one good thing this year is that apparently my neighbors are all treating their mites too, because my mite counts have been ridiculously low all year.
And something that the pieces of just listening to Dewey, Karen, pieces all kind of come together. Just a quick, sometimes the mite counts are low in the spring, but it's kind of misleading. So what happens is in the spring, and there's tons and tons of drones, the mites hang out on the drones, and it doesn't damage the workers. So you don't really notice any difference in the productivity of the hive. The hive still stays pretty healthy, but you'll if you see deformed wing virus, it's often on the drones first. But then what happens is after the blackberries are done, the drone production begins to drop. They're making fewer and fewer drones, and when there's fewer drones, that's when the mites migrate over to the workers. So it's possible to have a higher mite count than what it seems in the spring. They're just not, they weren't in that scoop of bees that you happen to get. And even in the spring, they're not doing much damage, but all of a sudden in the fall, when they migrate to the workers, it makes your hive sick. They can't make winter bees, and you're much more likely to get winter losses. So do make sure to stay on top of your mite counts, even though it seems low all year, especially when we get past blackberries. Start checking carefully.
Yeah.
The other thing you can do is you can uncap your 12 to 13-day-old drone brood and hunt for mites. Because if there are mites in that hive, that's where they're going to be hiding. And so do 50 of them, and then if you don't find any, maybe do more. But you could do that. This is actually a good time of year to do it because there's still drone brood in there. So if there is a mite build up, you'll find it that way.
Mm-hmm. And they do show up in the drone brood quite a bit. We just got a hive donated to another spot, and there was an entire frame of drone brood. So we started, cutting it open and checking, and there was mites all over the drones. It was really gross. They were crawling around and they were kind of everywhere. But when we did an alcohol wash, the alcohol wash showed 7 mites. I think it was like 2%, maybe somewhere between 2 and 3% mites, which isn't sometimes people would say, well, you have to be at 3% to treat it. To me, that was still way too many mites. But the drone brood, if the mites are there, they will show up there even on a moderately high mite count.
That's why I usually run drone frames in my colonies in May and June, because that's where the mites head off to. And the only trick is you got to make sure you pull them out in time. Otherwise, you give yourself a mite bomb. So what I do to combat that is I put a piece of masking tape on the back with the date and, remove drone brood by, and I usually put it a week ahead of time just in case. And then I'll check that week and then the following week and make sure that I have an extra one to pull out and then freeze. And then at the end of July, they pretty much don't make any drones anymore. So I just move those drone after I freeze them. I put them back on the outside and then they fill them up with honey for the winter. So I don't have to store them anywhere.
And if you don't have the green drone brood frames, you can, if you have a deep, you can put a medium in that drone brood position, and they will more than likely draw the comb on the bottom of the medium to fit the size of deeps, and it'll most likely be all drone comb. And again, you pay attention to the timing and get in there, and then you just can slice that whole bottom off. You got chickens, you go give it to chickens, and the chickens love you.
And then you've got nice fresh wax too to make chapstick out of later.
That's right.
What else? What else do you guys see last time you were in there? You had any questions? Kind of scratched your head a little bit? Worried about something coming up?
I think the thing I'm worried about is I've already done all my swarm splits and cycles. I'm seeing a second wave of that happening now, where they're laying in queen cells. You know, so swarm season is not over. You know, there's still a lot of food. I know a lot of people aren't seeing food coming in, but there is still food out there. So it's just solstice, so we aren't quite into July yet. But they usually stop at about mid-July. But there's a few hives I'm still watching at least every 7 days.
Yeah.
They'll probably have to split again a second time.
It's usually the colonies, everybody that are getting honey bound that will swarm. So watch those really closely.
Yeah, they're definitely bringing in a lot of food. So yeah, it's in Queen Anne where I'm at right now. It's privet that's in bloom, and the cherry laurels just finished blooming, and those are big nectar producers.
Oh.
The privet, people use that for a hedge because it's an evergreen. There's two types of privet. So there's the one that makes decent honey, and there's the one that makes stinky honey. So you don't really get to pick the difference between the two, but yeah.
Or if you're lucky enough to have ivy in your neighborhood, that.
Cat pee honey.
Who's tried it?
I think I tried.
It's bad.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't want to try it, just grab an ivy leaf and chew on that, and it'll give you a pretty good experience.
I had a little Tweety bird this year that loved it, though. I had a frame of ivy honey that I set out, and it was all super hard and crystallized. And I just like put it partway under a cantilever under my garage, so it would get a little wet during the rainstorms and kind of rehydrate it. And then the bees would come out when it was sunny, and they'd be all over it. And then there was this little Tweety bird that would come in, and it was helping itself too. It was cool.
You can always freeze that ivy honey and give it back to your hives in the spring. They can, as long as there's water that they can get to, they can reconstitute it and use it, and they don't mind the taste.
Yeah. And for those of you who don't already know, ivy honey is collected in September. So most of us have our supers pulled by then anyway. So it doesn't get mixed up in your honey, and it crystallizes almost overnight. So it doesn't extract well anyway. And yes, it really does smell like cat pee.
It does smell like cat pee.
So do moose swallows, by the way.
Huh?
Giant cat box.
Yeah.
You guys are a quiet crew today.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I always wonder what my bees are finding. Yeah, we are in a pretty forested area, though. There are some like backyard gardens.
Do you get
We do have.
honey? Do you get the honeydew from evergreens?
Possibly. That wouldn't surprise me at all, but first year for me, so I don't really know for sure like how much and from where they're getting it.
Yeah, look for it. It has a slightly green tinge to it, and I think it does. It depends on which source they're getting it from, but it can pick up some of that. I don't know, Christmas tree flavor. I don't know.
Yeah.
Wintergreen kind of. Yeah. From a nutritional profile, it's supposed to actually be pretty good for you, but it's harder for the bees to collect it. It's more damaging to them.
Yeah.
And it's got too many solids in it. It's not a good winter food for them.
Chunky honey.
Well, it's got too much other stuff. It's not pure.
fiber.
It's not like pure. Yeah, too much fiber. Yeah.
Yeah. Because it is aphid pea, pretty much.
And then if you guys do start getting honey a little bit later in the year, hopefully we get enough to at least extract maybe a tiny bit. The way there's a couple of real easy ways to test if your honey is ready to take out of the comb. The one is pretty easy. If you don't, you just take your top outer cover and you take your frame, and if it's not capped yet, you can take that frame and you give it a hard shake, horizontally over the cover. And if no droplets come out, then there's a pretty good chance that it's cured enough to extract. But to know for sure, you want to get a refractometer, and you can test your honey really easily that way to see if it's at or below 18%. And you can buy refractometers on Amazon for, I don't know, $20, $25, and they last forever. It's a great investment if you're planning on getting honey. There's two different kinds, but I'm never quite sure how to describe. I think one is for wine or olive oil or something, and then the other one is for sugar. So make sure you're getting the one that's for testing sugar.
There's one for beer, and then there's one for that we want to use for honey. That because the beer one has a different range on it.
Yeah.
Yep. Good. Thank you. That's how to describe it.
And the club does have extractors that they rent to club members.
So I have a question. I just put on a third medium today, first year here. How do I know which one is going to be the super? And if I'm using all mediums, I mean, I know I'm not going to get honey this year, right? Or enough to take, but how high is it going to go before I know it's going to be, like the super?
The super is really just a position, so
Okay,
it's in the top, right? So like they may do 3, they may actually do a 4th box.
Yeah.
And so the queen will probably go up in the 3rd box, but probably not up into the 4th. But if you've got a queen that lays a lot of eggs, then she might go up even into the 4th box. Usually this time of year is, like Don mentioned, is when they're laying the most eggs. So since you're just adding that 3rd one, the chances are good that the queen wouldn't go up, past that this year.
So then I'll probably just have 3 boxes this year.
Maybe. I mean, this year's so weird, Patty.
If you got one of those robust Italian queens, 3 boxes, 3 mediums is probably still small for her.
Yeah. She's got mostly Carniola and Mutts from me, and some of those queens lay a lot of eggs too. So
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
One thing that's go ahead, Sven.
I was gonna say in the spring, my hives were both 3 deeps in on larvae. So.
Wow.
One thing that's nice to watch for through the year is the queens always tend to move up, and the foragers always like to put the honey in that top box, but the queen is also trying to move up and go up where it's warm to lay her eggs. And what you sometimes wind up is what I call an empty basement. So that bottom box is not being used at all, but that's really good usable space. And sometimes the bees can fix it themselves. And what they do is they'll backfill those top boxes, and then that kind of forces the queen down further in the boxes, laying further down. But sometimes they just decide, well, the heck with you, we're just going to swarm. So whenever I get an empty basement box, I always just reverse boxes and I put that empty box on top. Or if you're running mediums and you've got one that's got honey in it already, and one that's got brood, I would put that empty box maybe between the brood and the honey. But don't be afraid to take empty boxes and move them up for the bees.
Okay.
Or even just frames.
Right. Yeah, it really worked. I think last meeting I was asking about because the second box was not producing anything. And so someone suggested, I think it was you, Don, to take some of the brood frames and switch it all up, and it made a huge difference. So that worked.
Okay, I'm gonna send a note to Tech Kit and see if we can get the room back together, and we'll do our presentation for the night. And I think I'll just call her because we tend to not look at our texts while we're in meetings because it's so fun to chat. Yes, we are ready. Okay. Okay. All right. So as soon as they come back off of mute, then I'll talk about a little bit what we've got for our presentation. Oh, they're on mute. Brian, can you guys hear us? Give me a thumbs up if you can hear us. Oh, good. Okay, we don't have to wait for them to come off mute. Okay. Hey guys, I hope that was fun. We had a really good time talking about bees, and I hope you guys did too. Sometimes when we can all get together and just chat about what's going on in our hives, those are the best meetings. So before I go into the presentation, I want to give one more quick plug for the picnic. Come to the picnic. You might get a chance to bid on some bees and buy some bees. You'll get some great food, great bee chat. It's always so fun to come and see the bees. We're going to do a hive check from 10 to noon. So if you're coming anyway, you can come and show up, and we'll go through the hives from 10 to noon. The picnic itself is from noon to I think it's noon to 2, noon to like 2:30, and then we're going to do a board meeting. And y'all are invited to come and sit in on the board meeting and kind of see what goes on in the board. It's pretty fun. You might decide you want to join or volunteer in some way, but it's kind of fun to just kind of sit around and listen to the board business, something that you don't normally get to hear too much of. So tonight, what we've got is, it's actually a recorded video. So it's not a live speaker, but it's on anaphylaxis, recognizing and responding to anaphylaxis. And so this is really timely because as soon as that dearth ends is when our bees start getting cranky, right? And they get a little more stingy. And we have, it varies from state to state, whether we can do things like use EpiPens on other people and how much we should be using. And I always worry that someone's going to get stung in one of my apiaries, and how legally am I allowed to help them? And so this is a really good video for recognizing anaphylaxis and what to do if you see it in someone. So let's see here. So I'm going to do a share screen, and there we go. Can you see that full screen? Is that okay? Thumbs up. Anybody? Brian, can you see it? Yep. Okay. All right. I'm going to hit play, and here we go.
So, hello everybody. My name is Jeff Ward. I'm a family medicine resident at the WSU Family Medicine Residency Program, and I'm excited today to talk to you a little bit.
Don, have you shared your sound? Because I can barely hear.
Oh, barely hear? Shoot. So let me do
Can't hear
that again. I'm going to go ahead and start over again here. So let me undo the share. Thank you for jumping in on that. I did. But let me try again. Oh, you're right. The sound wasn't shared. I have to do that every time. I just learned that today, actually. So I apologize. Here we go. So tell me again, if you can't, if it doesn't come across clearly, then let me know. This should sound better.
So hello everybody. My name is Jeff Ward. I'm one of the family medicine residents at the WSU Family Medicine Residency Program, and I'm excited today to talk to you a little bit about anaphylaxis. You'll see my emails listed here in this opening slide. If you have any questions or concerns about some of the material we cover, feel free to reach out. I'd be happy to kind of talk a little bit more with you on that. So just a brief outline of kind of what we're going to go over today. First off, what is anaphylaxis? how to appropriately recognize and respond to anaphylaxis. And then we'll wrap up by talking a little bit about the EpiPen auto injectors and how to use and maintain those auto injectors. So for an introduction, I think this is a really good sentence that explains anaphylaxis. Anaphylaxis is a severe, life-threatening systemic allergic reaction that requires immediate medical attention. One thing to note is that it's characterized by potential life-threatening compromise in breathing or circulation. It can present in a variety of different ways, and it can affect a wide range of organ systems throughout the body. We'll get into that a little bit more kind of as we go along. We'll get into the details of that a little bit more. So let's start by talking a little bit about what causes anaphylaxis. There's several things that can cause anaphylaxis. Very commonly, you can see food allergies causing anaphylaxis. Peanuts are a very common food source of anaphylaxis. Insect bites and stings are another common source of anaphylaxis in individuals. Some less common sources would be things like medications. Penicillin is one that you can see from time to time causing anaphylaxis. Latex is another thing that's a little less common, but it has been known to cause anaphylaxis. And then there's also what's described as idiopathic or unknown causes of anaphylaxis. The literature varies widely, and as far as how frequently this is seen, numbers will be anywhere from 14 to 40%, but basically just anaphylaxis with an unidentifiable source. And then rare causes of anaphylaxis, that would be like aerobic exercise, certain foods or weather, but that's very rare and won't be seen very often. So let's talk a little bit about local versus systemic reactions. I'm sure most of you at some point in your life have experienced a local reaction. When you're exposed to something, you might get some bumps and some itching somewhere in your body. It might be a little bit red. When it spreads to multiple areas of the body, it's then considered a systemic allergic reaction. We have some good pictures here. So on the left, you can see an arm that's swollen. That middle picture is a good picture of kind of some swelling and irritation that can occur as part of an allergic reaction. And then on that right picture, you have a swollen foot, obviously as a result of an allergic reaction. So like I said, this can happen in an isolated place in the body and be local, or it can be noted across the body. And when it spreads to 2 or more places in the body, it would be something that we would refer to as a systemic allergic reaction. So getting into a little bit more detail as far as local versus systemic allergic reactions, we have kind of a good sliding scale here. If we start at the picture on the left, you can see this child has some swelling on the lip, on that lower lip. That would be kind of a mild localized reaction. If you look at the next picture over, that next child has obviously more pronounced, not just swelling of the mouth, but you can kind of see around the eyes as well. There's some swelling, and then you can see that red rash spreading from the face and onto the chest. That would be more of a generalized allergic reaction. And then moving down the scale in severity, you have anaphylaxis. This picture is a little difficult, but you can see just the redness that's spread across this individual's abdomen. Looks like it goes up into the armpits. And then on the far end, severe anaphylaxis. This would obviously, on the far right, be an individual who's experiencing anaphylaxis that's severe enough that they need some airway support to make sure that they can continue to breathe. So again, there's going to be a wide range of allergic responses that the body can have, all the way from mild to what would be termed severe anaphylaxis. So one thing to consider, kind of how I touched on earlier, anaphylaxis can affect different organ systems in different ways, and it can vary person to person. So some of the severe reactions that you could see For example, in regards to the pulmonary system, you can have shortness of breath, wheezing, you can have a cough. Cardiovascular system can be affected, and an individual can have pale or bluish skin. Sometimes that's noted around the mouth. That's one of the first places you'll see that, especially with that bluish skin. They can also complain of faintness, weak pulses, or dizziness. Additionally, tightness of the throat, trouble breathing or swallowing, some angioedema, which would be swelling of the tongues or the lips, can also be seen. Kind of like that picture we looked at before, sometimes in the more severe cases, you can see hives that are widespread with a lot of redness as well. The GI system can be affected as well with things like vomiting or severe diarrhea. And then the nervous system can be affected as well. Sometimes individuals will feel like something bad is going to happen. They'll have anxiety or confusion. But all of those different symptoms from different organ systems are things that would be considered more on the severe end or the severe spectrum of things. So if you are seeing any of these symptoms in yourself or notice it in somebody around you, that would be consideration for sure for possible anaphylaxis. There's also mild reactions that can occur, and those would include things like itching, runny nose, itchy mouth, watery eyes, sneezing, a less mild rash, less severe hives, maybe not as widespread, maybe some nausea as well. If somebody's experiencing multiple mild reactions, again, it can be anaphylaxis. That's something that can be taken into consideration. I think from a beginning perspective, when you start to wonder, am I or is somebody around me experiencing what could be anaphylaxis, it's really good to identify, is this something that's emergent or is this something that's urgent? And I think a good way to kind of hone in on that differentiation is to try and have a conversation with the person if you're worried that somebody else is potentially experiencing anaphylaxis. Because if they can't hold a conversation with you or they can't manage to get out more than a couple words, that would be an emergent situation that needs immediate attention. As opposed to if they can hold a conversation with you, some important things that you might want to ask them would be, has this ever happened before? And do you know if you're allergic to anything? Those two basic questions can help you and can help physicians at the hospital when they arrive to better figure out what's going on and kind of the severity of the reaction that they're having. So again, a good starting point, if you're worried that someone has anaphylaxis, is try to hold a conversation with them. If you're able to hold a conversation with them, finding out if this has happened to them before and if they have any known allergies can be really helpful as we move through the course of their reaction, their allergic reaction. So let's talk about some risk factors that increase risk for anaphylaxis or for severe anaphylaxis. First and foremost, if an individual has had a previous anaphylactic reaction, that certainly puts them at greater risk for having a repeat reaction. Being a beekeeper is also a risk factor, as that puts individuals at increased risk for insect and bee stings. Genetics definitely plays a role as well. People who have a history of asthma or chronic lung disease or who are prone to allergies to certain foods or medications are certainly more likely as well to experience anaphylaxis or a more severe anaphylaxis. People with cardiovascular disease are also at increased risk. And one important thing to note is that people who are taking beta blockers, which is a type of medication, propranolol is a very common beta blocker that's often prescribed. If individuals are on that medication or a similar medication, they will have reduced effects of the epinephrine. So when they go to receive the EpiPen, it will not be as effective for them. Hormonal changes also play a role as far as risk of severe anaphylaxis. And then taking anti-inflammatory medication as well, specifically the NSAID medications such as ibuprofen or aspirin, can also increase your risk for anaphylaxis or a more severe anaphylactic response. So let's look a little bit at the time frame. Typically, anaphylaxis will begin within 5 to 30 minutes after exposure. Some people have delayed anaphylaxis and experience symptoms several days later. That is pretty rare, and in most instances, it will be a relatively rapid onset. There's another rare condition that's called biphasic anaphylaxis. Basically, people have an initial allergic reaction that kind of resolves and then comes back afterwards more severely. This is also a really rare condition. The literature, there's some variation as far as the time frame of this and what to expect. But in general, it's believed to be anywhere from 11 to 48 hours after exposure that people can experience biphasic anaphylaxis. Again, this is rare, but it is possible. So let's talk a little bit more about recognizing anaphylaxis in someone else. We've kind of touched on this a little bit, but you can see skin irritation in multiple areas of the body. Going back to being able to ask the individual some questions. Severe anaphylaxis can result in the individual not being able to speak more than 1 or 2 words at a time. And as I mentioned previously, that would be an indication that this is an emergent situation that needs to be handled right away. If you see an individual who's positioning differently, whether that's sitting straight up with their hands on their knees or trying to position so that they can get more air into their lungs, that can be seen as well. Using their neck muscles to breathe. You can see sometimes that people are really straining, trying to get air in. Those would all be indications that the patient is experiencing anaphylaxis. Another thing that's mentioned in the slide, sometimes individuals will have medical ID badges or bracelets. So you can look for that. I would not recommend spending a significant time looking for those. You know, if it's not obvious on the patient's wrist or around their neck, I would not waste time digging or looking for that at the expense of them getting the appropriate care and attention that they need. So the question then becomes, what happens when you're out and you're with someone else and you're worried that they're starting to have an anaphylactic reaction to, let's say, for example, an insect bite or a bee sting? The first thing you want to do is get an EpiPen and administer that. We will go into a little bit more detail here in a minute about the use of EpiPens, but you want that to be the very first step as far as action that you take. After administering the EpiPen, your next step would be to call 911. It's also really important that you don't delay in that as we need to get them appropriate medical care as quickly as possible. Then you're going to have the person lay down in a safe area and continue to watch them. And if they start to decline or get worse after that initial EpiPen, you're going to want to give them another. I was looking at a study here recently. There was a meta-analysis of, I think it was like 80 something cases or 80 something different studies looking at thousands of cases of individuals who experienced anaphylaxis and were taken to the emergency department. And the study estimated that approximately 7% of patients required a second dose of epinephrine. So something to keep in mind. More often than not, that won't be necessary. But like I said, approximately 7% of the time after that initial dose, individuals will see some initial improvement and then start to get worse. And so that would be a reason to give them a second dose of the EpiPen. And then finally, you're going to transport the person via ambulance to the emergency department. And then when they arrive, again, when the doctors in the emergency department are first seeing the patient, the more information that they have, the more beneficial, the easier it's going to be for them to appropriately treat the patient. And so if you can describe to EMS the symptoms they're having, if and when you gave an EpiPen, how the person responded to that, and then going back to our initial, that initial point that we were talking about, being able to give them the information of if this has happened previously, or if the patient is allergic to something, is going to be very beneficial and help a great deal with their care in the emergency department. Again, just to reiterate, the reaction process can occur rapidly. So it's important that you don't delay pursuing treatment. Highs can turn into shock within minutes. So another scenario, same thing, say you're with somebody and they've been stung by a bee and you're worried that they're having an anaphylactic reaction, and epinephrine is not on hand. So you don't have any of those epi auto injectors. What are you going to do? The first thing is obviously to call 911, and it's important when you call 911 to request that the ambulance bring epi with them. Lay the person down in a safe area, keep their legs up, try to keep them calm. If the patient or if the person who's experiencing this is panicked, it's going to make their heart beat faster, it's going to increase their oxygen demand, and ultimately it's just going to make a bad situation worse. And so while it's going to be difficult, doing everything that you can to help the individual to stay calm is really important. Occasionally patients can have vomiting. That can be one of the side effects or one of the symptoms, I guess, of anaphylaxis. If the individual is vomiting, it's important to roll them on their side so that they don't choke on their vomit or aspirate, and then continue to watch them from there. Another good point, if you have an inhaler, rescue inhaler with you, even if it's not prescribed for the individual, that is better than nothing. And so that's something you can try as well to hopefully give them a little bit more ease of breathing while you wait for the ambulance to arrive. So let's talk a little bit now about the EpiPen auto injectors. So there's two different ones. There's actually three, but we're going to talk about two today. There's an adult one and a child one. The adult one is a 0.3 milligram dose, and it's for people who are over 66 pounds. The child dose is 0.15 milligrams, and it's recommended for people 33 to 66 pounds. Now, it's really important to note when an individual is experiencing anaphylaxis, our goal is to keep that person alive and to keep them breathing. And so these doses are rough estimates. And the important thing, like I said, is that we're keeping them alive and breathing. So if you have someone who you're worried is having an anaphylactic reaction, they're struggling to breathe, they can't get more than 1 or 2 words out, and you're not sure, they're on the threshold, young child, you don't know if they're 66 pounds or greater than 66 pounds, use what you have. If all you have is the adult dose, or if all you have is the child dose, and you're with an adult, something is better than nothing. I want to share some numbers with you just that kind of reiterate this point. So let's take, for example, the child dose, which is 0.15 milligrams and recommended for individuals 33 to 66 pounds. If you have an individual who's 16 pounds, the dose, the 0.15 milligram dose, is going to be 200% of the ideal dose for that individual. So although it's not the ideal dose, it's still going to be really beneficial. If you look at someone who's 55 pounds in that range again, and you give them the 0.15 milligram dose, that's going to be 60% of the ideal dose. So it's not going to be the exact dose that would be perfect for them. But that's okay. That's not what's important in this scenario. What's important is that we're helping them to breathe and make it to the emergency department for further evaluation. Another thing that's kind of a common concern that I know people have voiced before is when injecting this medication, people are always worried about, well, what if it's not necessary, or what if it wasn't severe enough, or how do I know when it's severe enough for me to administer the medication? What if I give them too much? And so just for a little bit of further information on that, there was a study that looked at people who accidentally injected themselves with auto-injectors. So these would be individuals who weren't experiencing an allergic reaction or anaphylaxis and accidentally stuck themselves with an EpiPen. 77% of those people had their symptoms resolve without any further treatment. And then 100% of those individuals had their symptoms resolved. About 33% of them received some medication in the emergency department. But the reason I share that primarily is to reiterate we're trying to keep these individuals alive. And so while we want to get the best dose possible for that individual, accuracy is secondary as far as concerns to keeping that person breathing and alive. Oh, and one other point I wanted to make. They recommend that you always carry 2 of the EpiPens. There's several several reasons for that. One of the primary reasons is if there are any issues administering the first one, you have a second one. And then kind of like we talked about before, in approximately 7% of cases, individuals will require a second injection with the EpiPen because you'll see some initial improvement followed by some subsequent decline in their condition. There's also generic brands here. Again, I think we've kind of already hit on the main points. What's important is that you have the adult dose and the child dose, and that the individual receives what is indicated for them to the best of your knowledge, so that they can continue to breathe and stay alive. You know, sometimes, and I think we'll talk about this a little bit later, but if you have an EpiPen that's a little bit old, that's expired or something like that, again, that's better than not doing anything at all. And so best case scenario, if you have an adult, you'll give them the 3 milligram dose of the EpiPen, but the most important thing is to work with what you've got. So this is going to go, this slide here explains a little bit the steps of administering the EpiPen. And then I've got just a brief, like 2-minute video after this that we can go through that will show a little bit more detail. Sometimes I find it beneficial to be able to watch it on the video. So hopefully between this kind of walk through and the video on the next slide, you'll feel comfortable with the process of using an EpiPen. So to start, you're going to have the blue end to the sky and the orange end to the thigh. You're going to remove the blue safety cap, which is going to be on the top end. And then you're going to position the orange end about 10 centimeters away from the outer mid-thigh. Doesn't matter if they're wearing clothing over the thigh or not. The EpiPen injector can shoot through clothing. You want to obviously avoid if there's really thick pockets or something like that. But in general, the EpiPen can work through clothing. You're going to swing and jab the orange tip in at about 90 degrees. And then it's important that you hold it in place for 10 seconds, and you should hear a click. After 10 seconds, you're going to remove the EpiPen. Be careful because the needle sometimes doesn't retract, and you don't want to obviously stick yourself with the needle. And then after you've removed it, you can rub the area for another additional 10 seconds just to make sure that the medication is getting rubbed in effectively. So let's take a look here at this video, and let me see, I might need to get out of this view for a second so that I can pull this up. Perfect. So like I said, this is just going to be a quick 2-minute video that's going to be able to give you a visual demonstration of this.
To treat anaphylaxis, and the sooner the reaction is treated, the less severe it's likely to become. People with severe allergies or a history of anaphylaxis should carry an auto-injectable epinephrine pen with them at all times. Epinephrine typically comes as a single-dose, pre-filled automatic injection device, commonly known as an EpiPen, and is designed to be injected into the thigh. This training is based on the EpiPen brand of auto-injectable epinephrine. So if you use a different brand, make sure you follow the manufacturer's directions. Anytime an EpiPen has been used, make sure 911 has been called. The person must seek immediate medical treatment, even if they feel better. Now, to administer an EpiPen, remove the safety cap. Grip the EpiPen in your hand with the tip pointing downward. Never put your thumb, fingers, or hand over the tip. Firmly push the tip into the person's outer thigh until the pen clicks. The needle will go through clothing. Keep the auto-injector firmly pushed against the thigh at a 90-degree angle. Hold it there for 10 seconds. Pull the EpiPen straight out of the leg. Make sure not to pull out at an angle, as this could cause a lot of pain and bleeding. If blood comes out, the drug may also come out and reduce its effectiveness. Rub the area for about 10 seconds just to help drug absorption within the muscle of the leg. A second EpiPen may be administered if the symptoms continue or recur and there's a delay in EMS response of more than 5 to 10 minutes. The person will often feel relief from the tightness in the throat or airway fairly quickly. It's often normal for the person to experience side effects from the epinephrine. They may include a fast or pounding heart, shakiness, feelings of anxiety, dizziness, and a headache. Once an EpiPen has been administered, make note of the time it was used if possible, and be sure it's given to the medical professionals upon their arrival.
Perfect. So hopefully that was helpful. I feel like sometimes just seeing things visually can make it a little bit easier, especially if you've never used an EpiPen before. Okay, awesome. So let's talk a little bit just about the maintenance and care of the EpiPen. So you want to store it in an accessible area, avoiding extremes of temperature, so avoiding hot or cold, and also protecting it from light. You'll also want to routinely check it. There's a little window you can look through on the EpiPen, and you can see if it's cloudy, if it's got like particulates in it, or looks discolored. That would be an indication to replace. Most EpiPens last between 1 to 1.5 years. And so if it's expired, obviously you want to replace it as well. Again, we kind of touched on this earlier, but if you have expired injector and that's all you have, that's certainly better than nothing for treating anaphylaxis. And then disposal. So after you use it, you'll want to give it to the emergency responders for proper disposal. If you have an expired injector, there's several places you can take it. You can take it to a hospital, a healthcare provider, or your local pharmacy, and they can all discard it appropriately. You want to make sure you don't discard it in the trash, as people who are handling trash could obviously be accidentally stuck. Possible side effects of epinephrine injection: headache, nausea, vomiting, feeling weak, dizziness, paleness, sweating, anxiety or nervousness, shaking, palpitations, or feeling like, maybe your heart's skipping a beat or beating fast, and difficulty breathing. Again, kind of like I mentioned previously, the most important thing is making sure that the patient's staying alive. And so it's better to make sure that the patient's alive, even if they experience some of these symptoms, than to delay their care. As far as obtaining an epi auto-injector, a prescription is required for that. So talk to your healthcare provider about getting a prescription for that. The Washington State has laws that basically say, if you use an EpiPen, you don't necessarily need a prescription for that EpiPen. You don't have to worry about the legal complications behind that, as long as you act in good faith during the event that in case of the event that someone's experiencing anaphylaxis, because obviously, like we've touched on, getting them treatment is the most important thing. So some additional information on reporting the use of EpiPens. Washington State requires you to report when you do use an EpiPen, and they require that to be done within 5 days. Obviously, at the time of use, that probably won't be anywhere on your mind or one of your top priorities, but you'll have time afterwards to log on to the website. There's a form you fill out that's reported back to the state that they look at. So that is what I have today. I hope that was beneficial. If there's anything that you take away from this, I hope it's one, that you kind of have a basic understanding of how to use an EpiPen. And then two, if you're faced with a situation where you're worried that someone might be developing anaphylaxis or having an anaphylactic reaction, being able to immediately assess, is this emergent or not, through things with trying to hold a conversation with them and getting a couple more details, is probably the biggest takeaways. So hopefully that was helpful. I'll scroll back here again. My email is here at the front, jeffward@wsu.edu. Please feel free to reach out. If you've got any additional thoughts or concerns or questions, I'd be happy to answer them. So thanks.
Okay, there we go. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate you coming tonight. It was really fun getting to chat with everybody. And we learned, I hope you feel a little more safe about EpiPens now. If you've got one, it's okay to use it on somebody else. It's okay to even maybe use two, which I never would have thought. And it's okay to use them if they're slightly expired. Oh, Kathy's shaking her head.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I didn't know that either. And I always
I have a box with two. I gave one to a friend who's a beekeeper and said, you better have one of these. Now I know I should have kept it.
Yeah. And it's
what I
okay
get
to
for
give
being nice.
those to a child, and so it gave me a lot of peace of mind. Anyway, those of us who are around bees and are around other people who are around bees a lot, it gives you peace of mind.
I've known 4 beekeepers who have gone into anaphylactic shock.
Oh my goodness! So it happens, and it happens suddenly, even if you haven't gone into it before. So I hope to see you all at the picnic. You know, you can either make a dish or just pick up some chips and salsa, but come on by. It's a fun group. Beekeepers are the best people in the world. We're always so fun, such great conversation. It's probably going to be a beautiful day in July. So come on by the apiary to the Arboretum, and I'll see you at the picnic. And then I'll also see you next month. Thank you, everybody. Have a great month.
Yeah. Thank you.